Welcome everyone to Half History Will Travel. I am your host, the Wilder Historian, and if you have never heard of or read the works of Gary Gallagher, I highly recommend that you check out all of his books and articles. He is one of the leading authorities on the American Civil War with an incredible analytical mind. In the October 2021 issue of the Civil War Times, he asks historians and the general public to view the 7 days as one of the most important campaigns of the entire war, and put it on par with Gettysburg and Antietam as one of the most significant moments of the war. In this video, I break down his analysis, but I highly encourage you to grab the issue yourself and read it. The 7 Days Campaign was a brutal scene of carnage that resulted from George B. McClellan's Union Army of the Potomac forcing its way up the peninsula in Virginia and to the gates of Richmond, the capital of the Confederacy. On June 1, 1862, General Robert E. Lee replaced Joseph E. Johnston as commander of the Confederate Army in Richmond. Johnston had withdrawn up the peninsula, allowing McClellan to gain valuable ground along the way, but through a series of vicious attacks on the Union Army, Lee would push back McClellan and save the capital from capture. At the beginning of the campaign, with reinforcements from Jackson's army in the valley, Lee commanded a hulking force of around 90,000 men, and McClellan fielded 100,000 men. The heavy fighting erupted on June 26 with the Battle of Mechanicsville. Fitz-John Porter's men, who had been assaulted by Lee's forces, retreated to Gaines' Mill. At Gaines' Mill, the stubborn Union defenses gave way, and the Federals withdrew to the Chickahominy River. By July 1st, repeated assaults by Lee's army had resulted in McClellan pulling back to Malvern Hill, a well-defendable position, and even after Lee lost around 5,000 casualties on the slopes of that hill, McClellan's line, for the most part, was unmoved, and his subordinates urged him to counter-assault. But the overall commander declined and pulled back, asking for more men and supplies. By the end of the campaign, Confederate casualties exceeded 20,000 killed, wounded, and missing, and the Union lost around 16,000. Although harsh on the Confederates, this battle turned the tide of the war in the Confederacy's favor. Gallagher wants us to consider the circumstances leading up to the campaign. Take the military situation, for example. By June 1862, the Confederacy had lost significant ground in the West and the East. In the West, Union forces occupied Nashville and possessed much of the Mississippi River within the Confederacy. The cutting off of New Orleans made the river cease to be a thriving port that the Confederacy hoped it would be. Corinth, Mississippi, the vital railroad junction, was also in Union hands. Grant had taken over Fort Henry and Fort Donelson in February, and by April had defeated the biggest Confederate threat in the West. In the East, Irvin McDowell occupied Fredericksburg with around 30,000 men. The valley was full of Federals, even though Stonewall had defeated many of them, and now McClellan had led a successful campaign up the peninsula and was poised to take the capital. It seemed to be over for the short-lived Confederacy. Although there were many successes in the West, the East had yet to see a significant major battle, and most people looked to the East as the significant theater. The rebels had won at First Manassas, but that was a year ago. One reason that the East was such a focal point was because of the high population there, as well as many of the widely read newspapers. Also, probably more important to European powers viewing it from the outside, the two capitals were in the East, and not very far apart. So, a major victory for the Union in the East was of the utmost importance, but on the reverse side, a Confederate victory could pay significant dividends for the South. By this point in the war, Union morale was at an all-time high for the reasons that were just mentioned. The South looked to be the proverbial boxer on the ropes. Northern newspapers ran numerous stories claiming that the rebellion would be over very soon, since the capital was now within McClellan's grasp. The internal and external struggles of the Confederacy was incredibly destructive to the Southern nation. As Gallagher explains, every Union military success promoted war weariness among the rebels. Shortages of food, territory lost to U.S. invaders, and stringent governmental actions, most notably the Conscription Act of April 16, 1862, added to a gloomy situation. The Confederacy was lacking an army commander to inspire not only the army, but the nation. Albert Sidney Johnston was dead. Joseph E. Johnston, present at the Confederate victory at First Manassas, had lost favor with the Confederate public for withdrawing, and Beauregard had won criticism for his part at Shiloh. The 7 Days Campaign would change all of that and more. The bloody victory obtained by Robert E. Lee significantly boosted the morale of the Confederacy and gave them a winning commander to look up to. The Army of Northern Virginia rapidly became the most important national institution in the Confederacy and helped sustain morale in the face of mounting odds and hardships on the home front. The Confederate nation lived and died by the successes and defeats of its Eastern Army. The 7 Days also turned the Republicans in Washington against McClellan and other Democratic generals, some going so far as to call Little Mac a traitor for withdrawing from Richmond. Not only did it have internal political ramifications, but Abraham Lincoln adopted a less restrained type of warfare when it came to slavery and emancipation in the aftermath of the 7 Days. This new mentality by the president can be seen in the institution of the Second Confiscation Act on July 17th that allowed for the Army to emancipate slaves confiscated from disloyal U.S. citizens, as well as other property, especially such property used to support the Confederacy or used against federal forces. This harder policy came as a direct result of the 7 Days. 5 days after that act went into effect, Lincoln told his cabinet about his plans for a proclamation of emancipation, setting the stage for the preliminary Emancipation Proclamation to be issued days after the bloodiest single day in American history, Antietam. Europe was also concerned about the U.S. after the defeat at the 7 Days. A French diplomat wrote to Lincoln that after the 7 Days, it seemed as though the Confederacy was winning the war from the point of view of the Europeans. Lincoln responded by saying, "It seems unreasonable that a series of successes extending through half a year and clearing more than 100,000 square miles of country should help us so little, while a single half defeat should hurt us so much." Not only did the 7 Days hurt the morale of the Union, but the Confederate morale skyrocketed, and their attention to the Eastern Theater became their main focus. The success in Virginia was a success for the entire nation, and its people began to rely on Lee's army as the symbol of proof of their nationhood. So here we can look at a counterfactual question. What if the war had ended in 1862 with the capture of Richmond? The states would have been brought back into the Union with no alteration to the institution of slavery. It would have still been intact because up until that point, the Union was prosecuting a war with a restrained policy toward Confederate property. It was after the 7 Days that the Union policy changed as a result of McClellan being pushed off the peninsula. This also set in motion Lee's hard-hitting, aggressive style that landed him victories at Second Manassas and Chancellorsville and led to his defeat at Gettysburg. All of this goes to prove the great importance that we need to place on the 7 Days Campaign as one of, if not the most significant moment in Civil War history. Thank you so much for watching. I hope this analysis and explanation helped you rethink this little talked about campaign in 1862 and its larger importance to the Civil War. Again, please check out this article by Gary Gallagher and all of his amazing books and articles. Thank you again, and have a great day.